Tim and Jesse Miller, Tim Golden, myself, Tim Schnurr, the MSP Dr. Jesse Miller. We have much to jam into the next hour. We continue the theme of what makes an ideal cybersecurity offering for an MSP. What's the right mix of protect versus detect, proactive versus reactive, left of boom or right of boom, how they certainly affect one another. And at the end of the show, we talk about a little bit about, what's an ideal offering. Hope to talk and survey our host today on, pricing, maybe even margins and the MSP bottom line. And how do you kind of maximize both the bottom line profitability and the customer's risk return profile. But first, intros. Tim Golden, you want to go first?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. I am down here in super hot, sunny Florida for a couple of days. And let me tell you, it is a lot warmer here than it is in the 30 some odd degrees it is back in New Hampshire. So one of my favorite subjects today, left of boom, where I've been living for longer than I'd like to admit. But yeah, we have quite a character of casts here today. So seeing some familiar faces. Hey, Henry. Hey, Dylan. Rob, how are you? So yeah, I mean, if we want to just dive right in, give other people, Rob and the rest of them, a quick 30-second intro to say hi as well. Jesse, go ahead and take it away, my friend.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm glad to be with you again today. My name is Jesse Miller. I'm with Power PSA Consulting, and I help MSPs build and scale security programs through holistic and proven approach that unifies security operations across all of your business lines. Excited, as Tim said, for the group we have together today, trade some war stories about ransomware and everything else. So looking forward to it today.
Rob, you're up next. I think we'll go in order here. You guys assume this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And hopefully staying left of boom. So Rob Carselli, First Tracks Technology. We're based out of Columbus, Ohio. We're a traditional MSP that got drug into the MSP business by trying to service customers with their IT needs. Maybe Jesse can coach me up someday on polishing that message. But and as a result, we've also been drug into the cyberspace, much like our customers have. And we've developed an approach and we try to be proactive. But we've learned through trial by fire. And we've also learned by proactive vendors like the ones that are sponsoring this call. And happy to be here and share stories and learn from you, great folks. So that's me.
Great. Henry.
Means I'm next, right?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you guys. My name is Henry. I'm based out here in nice, cold New Jersey. So is the rest of the team. We're an operating system configuration hardening tool. Been around a couple of years, working on helping companies set up baselines, do remediation, alerting, reporting, all that fun stuff that comes with the territory, I guess. So I think we're the third one here that's left of boom, which I think, Dylan, you're like probably the one guy that's on the right side. It's a little unbalanced. But yeah, pleasure to be here. I'm fighting the RSA cold and my upstairs neighbor trying to tear down my ceiling. So we're having a great day today.
Heard a little of that before in the green room. Hopefully, he's done. So, Dylan, what's going on?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I am definitely the black sheep in the room. I am right of boom. And I'm excited today to talk about how we actually complement left of boom. And it'll be an interesting conversation with me on board. I'm with CyDef, and we're a threat hunting based solution. So it'll be an exciting talk today.
Awesome. Tim Schnurr, Fort Mesa, another left of boom vendor, really focused on vulnerability management, but also compliance, GRC, planning a roadmap and making steady progress in having continuous compliance. So that's what we're all about. So Tim, any ideas you want to drive here?
Sure. So you want to go ahead and kind of pull up my little slide deck that I have here. Let me see if I can make sure I have this appropriately. Yeah, go ahead and drop in my slide deck if you would. That'd be awesome.
There we go.
So building a left of boom cybersecurity program using NIST, right? And so we all know what NIST is, right? We all have some general idea of kind of how to build this out, right? When we think of left of boom, we think of, well, let's just start. What is boom, right? Boom is when the event happens. And I think it was Henry that said earlier, we are very heavy on left of boom during this conversation. So Dylan will go easy on you. But left of boom is what I like to spend a lot of my time and where I kind of live and breathe. And that is preparation, right? The right information at the right time with the right human and the right stuff, the policies, the procedures, the change management, all of that stuff to help you, if you want to go back to your Boy Scout days, be prepared, right? And the importance of that preparation, let's take incident response, for example. If you define a well incident response policies, procedures, and whatnot ahead of time, when boom happens on the right side of it, you will actually know what to do, how to do it, and not have to scramble in the middle of the stressful events, right? So you can actually start to build out some cost structures around that and some other things around, in that preparation phase. Feel free to stop me along the way if you had any questions. If not, I'm going to kind of bounce on to the next slide of some of these key principles, right? So Jesse, I know you're really good on like the risk side of stuff, right? You want to talk about how and why and where we can do some of this risk identity stuff?
Well, yeah, I think, you kind of hit on it, but what's really important is to make sure you have a plan, at least somewhat of a plan. It's probably, we could talk some stories later, but it's probably going to go to pot when the stuff hits the fan, of course, and Dylan can comment on that. But I think having at least some semblance of what you're supposed to do is the first start. So preparedness in terms of having a plan, number one, having people defined in that plan, and number three, having those people understand what they're supposed to do. So just start there to get the conversation going.
So speaking of preparation and risk, as I'm sitting here at my mom's house down in sunny Florida, having her pop in behind me, grabbing her paperwork, I probably could have better prepared by saying, "Hey, Mom, I'm live on video. You're welcome to come sit beside me and walk around, but yeah, we're live streaming." So it's all good. It's all good. So yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, Jesse. Anybody else have anything they want to share around the sort of the first step of identifying risk?
Yeah, Tim, why don't you talk about how you put together these slides, right? So
you're gonna give away my secret sauce, right?
The genius behind the slides. I mean, they look great. So
yeah, I think we'll get to that in a little bit. I want to make sure that we're well defining and talking about the process before we get into how this was all kind of put together, right? So we talked about identifying risk. We know about preventing attacks. We know about employee training and monitoring, right? And using the NIST risk management framework, right? And by the way, guess what they're adding to the NIST framework for a new domain? Henry, do you know what they're adding?
I'd assume if you're asking me, they're adding a baseline to it.
No. All right, Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are they adding?
I have no idea.
Can I answer?
2 for 2. 2 for 2. Nope, I'm going to let Dylan try.
You're going to be 3 for 3 on me, Tim.
All right, Jesse, what domain are they adding to the NIST framework?
Governance.
Yes.
Yeah. So you really talked about, right, like doing all these things, like policies and putting them together, but what's like the catalyst to make that happen, right, Tim? Right? The governance, right? Like the empowerment, the leadership, the direction, right? Like there's got to be someone running the show. So
there does. And so when you look at NIST CSF and you look at the framework that's been around for decades, right? It's really kind of surprising that there wasn't an actual component for governance. But when you dig through all the 800 series documentation, a lot of it talks about governance. So the fact that it was there but not actually defined, and now having it defined is like, it's a blessing to me, right? But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on what governance is, but in a nutshell, it's making sure that things are appropriately authorized, things are appropriately changed management, making sure end users actually know the things that are happening, and actually having some of that authoritative signatures and whatnot about like, yeah, this is what we do, and this is why we do it, and the standards that we adhere to. And thank God that they're putting that in there, because it's been such a key piece that's been missing in the space.
Yeah, Tim, the way I've always told people is the TLDR is it's defining what we do and then making sure that we do it, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Certainly missing that due care obligation, right, Tim? Like the fact that we're gonna act in our best, interest. Like we're gonna get this stuff in order. Everyone's gonna follow the rules, right? Like it sounds like we're 15 years behind, like the financial industry. The CEO's got to sign off on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you say that CEO signing off. So we all heard about the SBOM stuff, right? We've heard about the Log4j stuff, right? The new secure software development lifecycle stuff. There's due this month is the open for comment from NIST attestation on your software development lifecycle. So, and I was kind of going through this is what we're going to talk about in the peer group next week, is getting the CEO to legally attest to we're adhering to these things, which means we're governing our software development lifecycle. Things like, I hate to say SolarWinds, but things like those big breaches, right? Those, risks. Now there's going to actually be weight to that. Like we have to sign off as software vendors. Yeah, like this is the stuff that we do or don't do, and attest to that and actually have teeth and weight to it. So yeah, I digress. Going back to the slides here, addressing, prioritizing risk. How many of us do risk assessments? Let's see. Zach in chat. See you over there. Hey, Zach, thanks for joining us. Brad Frazier as well. Thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us in the LinkedIn chat there, do you do risk assessments, yes or no? It would be just a quick poll, for lack of better.
When you're
Rob, I'd love to hear your opinion. Oh, go ahead, Justice. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, Tim, when you were talking there, it occurred to me that I'd love to hear from Dylan about how do you see, and what does the incident response or right of boom teams need from the identify or the baseline portion of NIST? So I think identify, we always think left of boom, but things that we do there affect how we respond during right of boom. And so maybe you could give the audience just a little piece of what you're looking for from that identify piece of the NIST framework.
So when we're really focusing on left of boom and how we position ourselves is left of boom, it's the preventative solutions in place. And like Tim's talking about, it's a governance. We need to have a set plan of action when things take place, and it needs to come from the top down. That's the big push, to be honest with you. We work with multiple departments, and if we're at an enterprise level, working with CISOs, this is where I find risk memo reports are really great, because as a vendor, when we're trying to provide a solution, they need to be able to convey our solution up top. And that's where I see the real value in risk memo reports, and like something is clearly identifying risk. And like I explain that as risk is your vulnerabilities multiplied by your assets. And then you have to get a gauge for that. And when we're able to clearly communicate that at a high level, like if you are able to identify risk, if you're able to identify assets that are vulnerable, not acting upon that is negligence.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about assets, right? Because I'll put my MSP brain on here. When I think assets, I'm like, printers, laptops, desktops. Yeah, okay, done. Assets.
Now for us, we do focus on endpoints. which are in full encompassing that's laptops, desktops, servers, and virtual machines. But there is so much more. And like our employees are assets, right? So does that bring into the conversation cybersecurity awareness training? Everybody is a supplier, a vendor, an MSP. We've all been caught in the trap of saying, people are your weakest link. But you know what? The truth of the matter is people are our customers. We only exist for the people. Exactly. And part of the responsibility for us is being able to convey that clear message of the importance of reinforcing your people. It's one of the things I like to talk about is if you've everyone here, I'm sure, has taken a high school biology, a high school chemistry class. When you do that report, no matter how good the method is, it's all laid out, right? This is our left of boom. We always have to add into your notes, into your conclusion summary, there is the risk of human error with this lab. And I think that's the case with cybersecurity. And it's not a negative thing in sense. It's just something we need to address and bring to light.
Good.
Well,
Great stuff.
The asset piece, bringing people and process into it, help imply communication path and prioritization also. So it very naturally extends to that portion of the NIST framework for sure.
Rob, going back to governance a little bit, like talk about, I think it's been very difficult, like at least talking to MSPs like yourself and talking to the end customer. How do you get them to like basically empower or govern, right? Like how do you get them to care about it? I'm assuming the conversation varies, but like what's been your experience? Like talk to me kind of how you wade into that pond a little bit.
Well, I'm happy to say it's 2023 and the environment's a lot richer. There's a lot of better vendors and smart people like are on this call. I'm not including myself on that. But the early days of this came a lot from fear or reaction to an event. We all know that, right? We already know that the first virus sale or antivirus sale might have been driven by, a bad event. But I think one of the hard things when you say wade into it is just really aligning yourself with probably a mid-sized company that's just paddling like heck below the surface. And this is getting in the way in their minds, and either from a cost perspective or they can't make widgets or sell widgets or print widgets, whatever it is. And just aligning yourself to that. I also think that some of the early people that struggled with this weren't flexible in their approach, and they worked from the top to the bottom of the NIST framework and didn't take just any win along the way. So if you manage to implement one set of incident response plan and one communication plan and one technology that made you safer, like MFA, you were a light year or two ahead of where you were a day ago. And some of the people I think that waded into it with, well, let's start at the beginning. Tim Golden told me to start right here. Who are your stakeholders, right? Like, so that's been a learning for us. The last thing I'll say about it, Tim, is I think that every MSP, if there's a really smart one, maybe Jesse trained them or maybe they're here to work with them, but all taking our lumps. And I think that's an important part of the discussion with your customer on saying, here's why we added this product or this process to our stack, right? Versus just, we were really smart. We brought EDR in long before anybody got burned, so wading into it, I think we bumped into the guardrails a little bit.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, Rob, because I tell people that I'm actually not very smart. I've just made a ton of mistakes.
Yeah,
exactly.
I tell my clients, learn from my mistakes and do it right the first time.
Exactly. I think a lot of us that have been in the industry for a long time, before some of these preventative tools and technologies, like, how many countless numbers of mistakes that I've made that I've learned from. And that's really the goal that I'm trying to help here is like, learn from all of us, learn from Jesse, learn from the Henry, the Robs, the Dylans, myself, the Tims. Like, we've been there. We've struggled through this. We've figured out some of those speed bumps along the way and how to navigate and put the guardrails in place so that we can have, as an MSP, an effective program that can ultimately protect our clients and ourselves and make us more money down the road.
Yeah, and I just want to circle back with one piece of practical application on what we were talking about, right? So you heard some things about asset inventory, defining people and processes, having buy-in, all those things from Dylan. Just want to point out that so many people, think about their incident response and the threat hunting piece as kind of a break glass in case of emergency. And you really need to reach across the aisle, so to speak, and involve those people in the policy making and the decision making processes early on, very left of boom, so that when things do come to a head, it's more fluid and more efficient. Because I can't tell you how many times that, again, we talk about our own mistakes, that I have written a policy saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z in incident response. And then we bring in the insurance incident responder and it doesn't line up. And we should have had, when I was building my first MSSP, we should have lined up with what they were doing and talked to them about that. And so I think that's a pretty common misconception. So just practical application, involve your incident responders, involve your forensic people in the decision making on how you're going to structure your incident response plan and some of those processes up front.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
you make really good points. And Tim, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
go ahead, Tim.
It's not a one-man band, right? So yes, there are a lot of sort of smaller MSPs that might only have one or two humans working in that. But as we in the MSP community, start to be taken more seriously, right? And start to become that strategic business partner with the business, having those conversations, getting a seat at that table, right? We're shifting, or we're seeing the shift from the ones and zeros technical implementers, and that is important, and we'll continue to have that and need that. But the shift of having those business conversations, right? That's where Jesse comes in really well, right? Having, the right seat at the table so that you bring in the right conversation, the right people in those conversations is really key.
Yeah. Just I won't belabor this point too much, but we've talked about this previously, in that again, I love the point that Dylan made about getting the CEO or the top level buy-in. So you have to understand who you're talking to. The CEO doesn't want to hear about incident response. He or she doesn't care about that, right? So you have to put it in their terms. When you say, okay, now you're fine, you have to sign off that we're doing these things. And so your signature and your name and your reputation, and maybe even your freedom, is on the line, as we saw from this recent court case. We need you to make sure that you're actually involved and active in the process. So.
And just to expand a bit on that as well, Jesse, like I think some of the things as a vendor and as MSPs, and as a vendor that tries to empower their MSPs and their partnerships across the board, one of the things we need to do is understand the language that's being used at that level. They're not going to be, they don't have the same experience. They don't have the same know-how. That's obviously why they're partnering with us. But we need to be able to translate that to the top, whether, we're reducing complexity. We need to be able to speak on their terms as well, so we can be heard. And I think back to Rob's point, communication is the real key to all of this being successful, and when having all parties being able to communicate and showing that we actually care. Everyone on here has learned is the key word there, learned from their mistakes and still moved forward because we care. And we see all throughout the industry, so many, let's say, enterprise level businesses giving blatant examples when they don't care. And that's where incidents take place.
So I love the fact that you said speak in terms that they understand, right? And so Tim alluded to this earlier, right? So yes, I had the PowerPoint up there, and yes, I kind of threw that PowerPoint together by using a AI, machine learning, blah, blah, blah. But I basically said, here's the topic I want to talk about. Create my slides, but I take it a step further. And this is actually, I think, a way MSPs could do this, right? Because we talk geek, we don't talk CEO, right? But when I do like that little thing, I was like, and make sure your response is using 5th grade English. So it doesn't come back as geek speak, it comes back as 3rd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, like in language that they can understand. So little plug, I'm not suggesting that you use AI and ML, but it is a good way for us as tech speak to interpret our technical brains into words that they can comprehend.
So when you entered that chat GBT, did you say, give me a NIST presentation, left a boom, that a fifth grader can understand, or did you not add that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually said, take on the persona of a small business owner and respond and build a presentation using the NIST framework and use fifth grade English. I actually typed in and use fifth grade English.
Okay.
That when it came back, it was in words that people could understand and consume. And I do that a lot, actually. Like, I speak geek, we all speak geek, and translating that to the, getting the seat at the table and translating that to the other humans that are at the table, they're not going to want to hear. What they hear is Charlie Brown, wah wah. So that's where I find power of the AI tools is take Tim's geek speak and translate it into something they can understand. You can even take it a step further and say, now create me an analogy on that industry. So anyways, we'll digress on that. So, a lot of this left of boom stuff, right? We talk about documentation, we talk about preparation, we talk about baseline configurations. What the hell is a baseline configuration? I mean, back when I started this, 17 years ago, those terms were being used and there was nothing on baseline config. And I was like, had to figure like, what does that even mean? But now it's so prevalent in what is your baseline? Well, for me, okay, Windows 7 with antivirus. Okay, no, it's even more so than that, right, Henry?
Yeah, but I mean, that kind of gives me a question that maybe you or Dylan can answer a little more clearly for me. Do you think there's a point or sort of middle ground there where we're trying to dumb this down into, like you said, fifth grade speak, right, for the CEO? But if that's the guy that's personally liable for this stuff, at some point, do you feel like there's some sort of middle ground we should be shooting for where maybe they should understand at least the sixth grade level of those terms before we're trying to dumb things down into concepts that don't even make sense anymore?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, exactly, right? So it depends on the level of not just communication, but education that you have been providing to your client. They're not going to want to care about GPO, ADAD. They're not going to want to care about, but they want to know, what is a baseline config? What does that do for my business? And how does that protect me and my staff? I hear the word baseline config. You need to break that down into smaller terms so that they can consume it. But the risk of not having it, like once they understand the initial concepts, then you can dig into the risk at a little more deeper level. At least that's how I approach it.
I think as well, Tim. So I had a LinkedIn post maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was Top Gun, right? Like, we don't make policy here, right? Like, Henry doesn't make policy. Henry is the tools that implement that policy, right? So like, I don't think the stakeholder necessarily has to drive into like fixing an F-14 engine, right? Like, Henry is getting in there and optimizing configuration settings, right? Like on those machines. So to what degree, does the CEO need to understand, Henry, don't get me wrong, what is it, 250 controls, right, for your Windows configuration, CIS controls or something like that. So you're getting pretty deep into all the automation, right? Like, you really are the tools of that policy. So
Yeah, I think
I would argue that you have actually done something as an MSP if it's not a technical discussion. I don't think it's a technical discussion.
agree. Yeah.
I was going to expand on what Tim said. I believe education is the key. When you have a client and you educate them, you create a fan. And a fan is somebody that sees you as it sounds a little cliche, a little corny, but a fan is somebody that trusts you. And in this industry, that's what it's all about. We need trust. And trust, back to Rob, is what opens those doors for just to communicate. It's just a conversation, a communication. And that's really everything for us.
I think you eventually drill to technical capability or competence just by talking about capability. So if ultimately the discussion becomes at a high level of what it needs to be for the business, then you can drill down if you need to. But if you've achieved that level as an advisor, where you're just talking about it at a business level without technical,
Yeah.
I think you're in a good place and you're serving your customer well.
Yeah, you put it in terms of financial and business risk, and have anecdotes, analogies, and aphorisms ready to go. If they ask, tell me more about this or that. And I think that's the right approach.
Yep.
Absolutely.
To Henry's question earlier, just gonna dwell into that a bit more as well. I think part of our jobs and what is, it's hard because maybe we're asking more of ourselves, and I'm sure everybody here is busy enough. But a part of my job specifically is being able to communicate across all parties. Cybersecurity awareness at a CEO level is just a number. It's just something that needs to be added into the budget. At the very end, for the employees, that's real protection for them. That's, the shifting of critical thinking, and that's what's going to actually protect the business from the bottom up as well. So conveying that to each end of the spectrum, I think, is part of what I'm responsible for.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we talk about that, like, so automation we were just discussing, and I think a lot of cybersecurity is hard, right? And a lot of it's like frictionless to the employees. So like, how do you make them understand why you're doing things, why the policy exists, what are the end results of that policy, and how much of this stuff like can be automated so it's not like deadly annoying, right? Like, it shouldn't take you 10 minutes to log in every time you get on a machine, right? So there's always that balance. So you've got to strike that balance of as you said, trust, but also respect that, like, I'm not trying to make you do this triple MFA or whatever, because there's a balance there. Like, a lot of the controls you look at, Tim, right, in NIST and CIS are like, here's all the things you can't do, or we're just going to lock down that you're not allowed to do.
So this is a really good banter, right? So Elizabeth, if you could pull up both Tim and I side by each, right? So I'm reading a book right now called Extreme Ownership. If you haven't actually read that book by Jocko, and if you haven't read it, I should suggest you go read it. And this happens a lot. Like, when I first got into this space and I started like looking at the controls and locking things down, I was known as Big Bad Tim, right? I was known as, he doesn't let me do anything, and the lesson that I learned from that in the beginning was, don't just go lock everything down because that's what you want to do because we're technical. The bar that I missed was the why, right? And there's a great chapter in Extreme Ownership that Jocko talks about, like, going into this business and the sales executive was responsible for this major change and it kept failing everywhere. And the reason why was because he never took the time to explain the why behind whatever it is that they were doing. So when we as technologists, like, we want to go plug ones and zeros, we want to fix stuff, we want to, I do that, but we never take the time to explain the why. And again, left of boom, if I have that conversation on, this is the why, as Jesse said, these are the risks, right? This is what you face by not doing it, and you get that buy-in at the beginning around the why, then the actual how of rolling out Sention, rolling out Polygon, rolling out Fort Mesa, rolling out these tools is not obtrusive, right? It doesn't get in the way because now they get it. Like, the why is so important in having these conversations.
Yeah, and especially with zero trust, right? So like, you're starting with zero, you're starting with nothing, right? So like, here's an AWS server, right? Like, there's no access to it, zero. No one's allowed to access it. There's no software on it. There's nothing. It can't do anything. Like, the safest machine is an unplugged one, an air gap one, right? So if you've ever worked at a big company, you'll start to understand like how painful real zero trust is, right? Like, like building from the bottom up, or getting something to actually function, like that's their way of doing it, right? Like big companies, like they don't want the risk, so like they're just like methodically build things up. So as you said, Tim, the why is important, and if you don't understand the why, you're going to be frustrated as hell with what's happening. So
Yeah.
Well, it'd be a lot easier without apps and users, but the revenue stream shrinks, Tim.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Right,
So,
I know. So you're the sysadmin. People have to deal with you at a big company, but you're the MSP. They don't have to deal with that MSP. So
yeah.
And even when Tim was talking, Tim G, I should say. Now we got to use it's like it's not what we don't. We've started. First of all, I don't like the term zero trust because I think that I don't want to hear that about any product I'm buying. But I don't trust you, right? So that's already a bad thing. You just bought a brand new German car, but I won't trust you to use CarPlay just to keep you safer from your attention on the road. But so I think there's terms that our industry needs to work on, and I think that there's terms that instead of telling you I'm MFAing you to protect you, I really want to make sure I know who you are so that I can deliver a rich experience.
Exactly.
The narrative just has to be different. I think the why is built into that, but I think, and that helps us as we're executing the work, by the way. Our attitude shouldn't be, we're keeping everybody out of their apps.
Yeah.
It's, we want to make sure it's the 5 people in accounting at this mid-space country company to get into NetSuite or whatever.
Yeah, Rob, so y'all know I run a peer group. We just discussed this literally yesterday on our peer group, and then we distilled it to the TLDR: the right person accessing the right thing at the right time, right? And it's all around what we talked about, ICAM, or Identity Credential Access Management, right? Which is a whole nother acronym. Yay, acronym soup. But TLDR, the right person accessing the right resource at the right time that's been authorized. I'll throw that piece in at the end. That has been authorized. You need somebody other than that human saying, yeah, give me full access to accounting. No, the CFO needs to approve that.
So Tim, what was TDLR again?
Too long didn't respond.
Gotcha.
Too long didn't read.
Didn't read, excuse me. Yeah.
Yep.
TLDR, too long didn't read.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's Google it. ICAM. It's ICAM. It's like 40 pages of documents in NIST, but it all talks about the right person at the right resource at the right time that's been authorized by the right human.
So, yeah, a topic I'm dying to get into, and I really want to save some time for this. So I'm going to bring it up now. Hopefully, I'm not undercutting your itinerary here, Tim. But
not at all.
I really do want to talk about the balance of right of boom versus left of boom, both tooling, personality or personnel, and focus. Right? How much should we spend on each? Are we spending too little left of boom? Are we spending too little right of boom? It's interesting because you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast here that, or the live stream here, that we have one right of boom person and, two left of boom people, and then a couple of people sitting in the middle there. So I think that's pretty representative of the landscape currently in terms of vendors and everything else. So I just want to, maybe somebody can, whoever feels froggy can jump out and grab what I just said and start somewhere with that.
I think the right of boom is definitely, you'll see more vendors on a showroom that are right of boom than left of boom.
Yeah.
But although you're right, in the last year or two, it has dramatically identity access and the variance of it, PAM, permission access management, right? Like
Privileged.
that has definitely escalated. But I think a lot of, I always used to say, like, you have to build the castle before you arm it with guards. I think you were just like putting alarm systems on a forest, and it was like, okay. There was
exactly.
So
it's
hadn't done anything. You don't need, and by the way, you didn't even know where the land started and ended because you didn't do inventory management. So I think we're playing a little catch up on left of boom, but that's my opinion. I'll let you guys go around the horn.
Now sorry.
No, go ahead. I can talk about this stuff all day, so I'll stop interrupting.
Yeah. I had a question, and I'm sure actually Tim Golden, you'll be the man to answer it. Do you, for everybody here on the panel, then, do you think the shift then from there being far more left of boom, right, far more of a preventative outlook and far more automation, do you think the need in the labor is what's pushing that? Because automation, when we're doing threat hunting, when we're doing incident response, these are quite specialized areas. And this is the area where, we're having in the industry, there's a huge demand for this. Do you think the demand for specialized personnel is what maybe is pushing this left of boom, this automation for clients?
So that's a really great question, right? I have a bunch of different thoughts. I could probably talk for 6 hours on this, right? But, having been in the space for 20 plus years and seeing the iteration of MSPs over time, I don't remember who I was talking to, doesn't matter. Probably for the last decade or better, we have been playing defense. The bad actors, they're coming everywhere all the time. We don't know when, and we're like literally thwarting off, swatting the ball, like defense. And so we saw this big rise in tools and automations and things to help defense, blocking all of that stuff, right? And so we didn't talk about offense. We didn't talk about a lot of the preventative stuff. So, and now that we have some tools, some people in the process to help with that defense, and defense is never going away. Now that we kind of have gained some efficiencies in that defense, we can actually start to go on offense. We can actually start to move towards left of boom and put in the preventative. Like, how many of you are code writers? How many of you write test procedures before you write code? No. You write code and then you go back and make sure the test fits the code, right? How many of us go on that defense? We've been sort of subliminally trained for decades. Defense, where now that we've gained some operation efficiencies in those defensive tools that help us, we can free up a little time to go on the offense, right? I've always been write it first, make sure it makes sense, document it, and then go do it. It's just how I look at things differently. So to specifically answer your question, yeah, some of those tools have freed up the labor time. Now they can go onto the left side of boom and start using that. I don't want to say excess labor, but they can start going on the offense.
Yeah, and Tim, I think a lot of the left of boom stuff, like governance, like that's not a word I want to hear on a Friday afternoon, right? Like,
No.
This stuff is boring. Policies. You're gonna make me take some assessment on policies. I'm like,
hey, Henry.
Right? So it's not sexy. It's not advanced AI detection. SOAR, right? Like all these acronyms, SIM, like SOC, like all the fun stuff, right? All the big, big heavyweight data-driven detection systems, right? Like this stuff is meat and potatoes, right? Like this stuff is, as you said, it is a lot. You needed that human labor to be freed up to actually get in front of the customer and actually like think about like, how do we run these playbooks? Playbooks, that's another thing in the SOC, right? Like, I think that it's just, we're finally getting to a point where like there are vendors out there trying to address these things and make it easier. The Polygons, the Fort Masons out there, right? Like trying to make it easier, trying to make it less painful, because it is painful, right? Like governance and policy. I'm not saying this is like my dream job, like,
It's mine. It's what I do.
Right.
So, yeah, but let's distill that real quick. So I was just going to ask Henry, what is the very first control in CIS IG1?
You're asking a question. I'm not going to know the answer to it.
Put on the
Love
spot.
putting people on the spot. So who here can actually answer what is the very first control on CIS IG1?
I think I'd throw it to Rob, and I think you'd probably get it. But
anyone? Bueller?
No.
Asset inventory.
Oh, Yes. But everybody
I better run
always
1.1.
stops with those two words. If you read the entire control as it's written, understand your assets and review them and make sure they're appropriate on a weekly basis, actually. Now, weekly seems a little tough. Yes, I get it. But if you read the entire control, right? We talk about CIS. For all the other frameworks, whatever, it doesn't matter. But taking your assets, your people, your hardware, your software, and making sure that it's right frequently and updated frequently, right? Yeah, Chris Johnson just popped that in the chat message. Yes, asset inventory. Chris, if you're anywhere near Google, drop that entire sentence of what that control is into the chat and read it, because governance is literally the first control of CIS. Not only do you have to identify it, but you actually have to govern it, review it, make sure it's correct.
How many attacks are like from assets that weren't in scope or weren't like? And has that happened, right? Someone goes home and does work on a home machine, right? We just heard, was it LastPass? Is that the one? Yeah. Right. Like, how many times is that off? That, you know, they're off the reservation and they access the reservation. So,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, people, and it's kind of interesting, Tim. Why would inventory management be the most important thing you do? Not only is it number one, but CIS controls are designed so that they're done in order, right? Like,
Mr. Carter.
Yeah.
Ooh, Mr. Carter.
Like,
I'll let someone else answer.
How is that keeping me safe? You're like, well, this is how. Yeah. So.
You gotta know what you have. You gotta know what you have if you want to know what you got to protect, right? So step one, figure out what you got before you leave everything else behind.
How's that construction behind you, Henry? Is that like the Gong Show?
My connection cuts, you know what happened.
I'm waiting for the ceiling to fall in on your head. Is that left of boom or right of boom?
I think that is my boom.
That is
so
your
at this
boom.
point, am I left the boom here? Should I leave? I'm just gonna.
Just real quick, since we're kind of bantering, a little question that I'm just my curiosity, and maybe this is caveman speak in cyber, but as an MSP, it almost has felt like the boom almost becomes kind of like failure. Like we have failed if we got to the boom, right? Like it wasn't always that way, because at some point we were there and we were the only experts that could get people out of a mess. But now that things and the tool sets are changing and the energies and the awareness are changing and the landscape is more populated, it feels like, wait, I got to Dylan?
Yeah.
You're a bad MSP. I had to call Dylan in. Yeah. No, I called him in. Dylan's my partner, but you know.
Well, the one comment I have on that like framework of mindset, Rob, I'm not going to be doing the person justice, but it wasn't me that quoted it. And their big thing was, you know, since the Industrial Revolution, man has gained the power of the god, but maintained the wisdom of a child. And that's the problem with technology. That's the, you know, tying into all the parts of the conversation with communication. Why does the employee even care? He doesn't even realize how powerful the laptop, the computer is in front of him. Right. You know, and I think back to Jesse's original question, what's the balance? I think, or, you know, where's the investments? I think it's a healthy balance. I think it sounds like a lot of work, but we have to be flexible. Each client, each customer, each MSP has different needs, different wants. They're playing a different game, and it might be the same game across the whole industry, but there are varying levels, and we need to be able to be flexible to provide them the appropriate solution at the appropriate time.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's right. And I think also, you know, we don't live in right of boom. We live in left of boom. And so it's only natural that there's going to be more controls. I mean, you look at the NIST, and I have it here up on my screen as we're talking about it, but you look at the NIST controls and we're maybe the bottom quarter is right of boom, just in terms of the different categories. And I don't think that's bad or a mistake. I think we have to understand that there is a right of boom. We don't live in it every day, but we have to do some succinct things to prepare for it. And we have to be ready for it when it does happen. And I liked Rob's question, because he said, if we feel like we failed. And I would say that, well, that depends. You know, the decisions you've made for the last 12 months are going to inform whether you failed or not. I can tell you two quick stories about a tale of two clients, so to speak. And this is why I'm big on vCISO services and always having proactive security strategy as part of your package. But because you need to advise your client on these things. If you're not advising them and then it happens, well, yeah, you're going to be at fault and you're going to fail because you didn't prepare them adequately for it, or at least you didn't advise them of it. So the two quick stories, and I'll try to shorten these. One client we had who was early adopter of our vCISO services and our security stack when we launched it in our MSP, took all our advice. They set up a zero trust network and approach, and this was maybe 5 years ago. So they were pretty early on the cusp of that, and they were only about a 100-person company. And we had another company who was 200 people who didn't take our advice. They were using us for tier 2 services. It was like a co-managed thing, and we kept telling them, you need security, because we were in there. You don't have security, you need it. But we were very clear on giving risk assessments, showing them they had risk, making sure they were informed that they were at risk, and making them make the decision to not go with our services. Both companies had a ransomware incident. The first one was from an acquisition. They were acquiring a new company, and because of our process that we had put in, we did put them through a risk assessment. That company, we caught some things in the risk assessment. We said, we really don't like this. Don't connect them to your systems yet. And that next week, the incoming company had a ransomware attack. Okay, but they weren't connected to the parent company. And all that was affected was that new inbound company, which was maybe 5-10 users. There was already new laptops on the way with the ZTNA client on them, Zero Trust Network Access client on them. So really all they did was shut down their old equipment that was ransomware, turn up their new laptops, connect into the new corporate network, and they were up and working in less than 24 hours. Okay, they had to report, obviously, and there was some fallout, but it was almost no effect for that business. Now, the second business had a complete ransomware attack, didn't have cyber insurance, and didn't pay the ransom. So we racked up about $200,000 in incident response services. Okay. But guess what? They were not the least bit mad at us. They didn't see us as having failed because we prepared them.
Right.
We warned them. All they wanted was our help. And we gave it to them in spades, got them back up and running, and also inked our largest MRR cyber contract to date.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
So I love what you said about, I think you used the word caveman. Like, okay, whatever. There's a psychology behind boom and the after effects of a boom, right? That I'm not a psych major. I don't know a lot about that, but at least in my own brain, like there's that looming, like, I don't want something to happen. There's that like underpinning psychology of I failed. And as Jesse pointed out, as long as we're educating, as long as we're doing risk assessments, as long as we continue to inform our clients of their risk and they choose to either do something or not, like, we didn't really fail. Where we fail is not saying anything, not educating, not documenting, not putting in risk registers or doing business impact analyses or any of that. Where we fail is not doing our own due diligence, not just on our own MSP, but with our clients. That's the failure. Not boom happened and now Big Bad Tim is in trouble.
Right.
Yeah, and it's that lack of resilience, right? Like that, you know, you're gonna get hit. What are it, Band of Brothers? The guy's like, oh, that guy fights like the war. He's already dead, right? He's like, you're gonna get hit. I'm sorry. Like you're, no matter you're like, it's not if, it's when. You're gonna get hit. Like, to what degree can you be resilient, right? Can you grow back? Can you defend off? Can you minimize the damage, right? Like least trust is really just about least. It should be called least trust, right, Rob? Not zero trust. We don't deal in absolutes in cybersecurity.
I like continued verification.
Yeah, continued verification. There you go.
How many acronyms?
But yeah, creating these little silos, right? Like if my submarine's got 100 silos, it's pretty hard to sink me, right? So you want to create smaller attack surface areas, right? Like, and I'm going acronym soup here, even though those aren't acronyms, but
Analogy.
yeah, analogies. But yeah, no, it's I know we got a couple more minutes here. Tim, anything we want to focus on before we close out? Closing comments? We want to make the around the horn here.
So yes, this whole scenario that we're having here today, we've got people on both sides, left and right, and some that sit in the middle. You know, when we think holistically, doesn't matter whether it's right or left, whether it's boom or not. As an MSP, as a technology professional, I think it was Dylan that said, being able to communicate to our clients in words and terms that they can understand, taking into consideration things like Jesse said around risk analysis, business impact analysis, taking into things like system hardening from Henry, right? Bringing that holistic approach to, hey, boom's going to happen. We should talk about it, and we should make sure that our clients are educated around it, right?
I think that's the most important thing. I think it's the most important thing, Tim. And, you know, at the end of the day as well, I think building that trust with them, even when we're having discovery calls and people aren't necessarily clients, educating them is for me the end all and be all of it. If they can leave with more information after they've met me than before, then I have made a positive impact. And that's one of the things I think we all need to focus on. It's a hard industry. Not everyone in our industry is a great communicator, and we need to, you know, be respectful of that as well.
Awesome. Any Henry, any last remarks there?
No, I mean, I think I agree with most of what's being said. It's the same for us, right? Just thinking about the educational piece of it, whether it's technical control, governance, whatever it might be, just being able to provide a little more information. They understand, you know, why something needs to be set up the way it does, why you'll probably still get breached at some point, what you should do when that happens, and, you know, pretty much everything from A to Z. I think every little bit of information we can provide is sort of the first step to making improvements.
Awesome. Rob, any last comments?
It's just part of doing business today, right? So you can be better than your competitor if you understand these things, and you can be more insurable, and you can be all the things that every business strives to do, is just be better than your competitors. So if we as an MSP can help deliver that just in this space, one less worry or one more measure of preparedness, I think we've brought value to the market. And I appreciate it. And I need to know if Jesse really has Wyoming up there, because we need to do the ski acronym version of this. If that's what's on his hat the next time, there should be a ski version.
Is it a Wyoming hat? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think so.
South Dakota. That's what us Minnesota farmers do for vacation, is we go to the real ranch state and learn how to ranch from the real cowboys.
Well, as long as there's mountains, I'll show up.
Well, not much of that, yeah. Jesse, go ahead. Any last remarks here?
Yeah, final closing thoughts. I mean,
yeah,
I think people have said it, but, you know, start with a foundation, baseline the environment, make sure you're educating the client with risk, have ongoing management of the security program, and include right of boom planning in all of your left of boom phases, because those all inform right of boom, and don't forget that. And then bottom line, make sure that you have operational processes in place for all these different things. You cannot wing it. And if you need some help with that, come see me at Power PSA.
Awesome. Tim, so next week we're talking vulnerability management with a young man named Walter Haydick, I believe, and a couple other guests on the show. So looking forward to it, but I think we're out of time. So time for the weekend to begin.
Awesome. Hey, everybody, safe Friday afternoon drive. Thank you so much here for this episode of Team Tim. We look forward to seeing you next Friday, where we talk VMP. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah.